Since this is going to be done for ITV, would you like me to speak in Queen's English?
Today we're going to analyze Paris Lee Bennett. He killed his 4-year-old sister in 2007. And Greg wants to tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Yeah, so Paris Bennett was 13 when he murdered his 4-year-old sister Ella by stabbing her 17 times as he choked and horrifically assaulted her. Paris pleaded guilty in juvenile court to capital murder and was given the maximum sentence of 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. And following that murder, psychologists say he's a psychopath.
My first question for you is, why are you doing this interview? What do you hope to get out of this?
I believe that the most important goal for me is to show people that I may be incarcerated, but that does not necessarily mean that I am a monster or a villain, that the mistake I made 12 years ago at the age of 13 is not something that defines my life.
I've seen video footage, I've seen still photographs of you together, you playing the role of perhaps protective older brother, her as the cheeky, mischievous younger sister. Can you rationalize or explain now how you came to do what you did to your sister?
I don't think I can easily explain everything, because if I could, we wouldn't be talking about it 12 years later. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges for other people through the years, because no one likes to be confused. No one likes to be bewildered. We like easy answers.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, okay. It says the word villain, and we get contempt or disdain on that. One side of the mouth goes up. I don't think it's into a smile, so I don't think it's a duping delight of any sort. I think it's contempt or disdain. Why? Not sure. Not a mind reader, but that's what I put there. Others, he says, are going to be challenged, bewildered, or confused by the difficulty of explaining why he killed his sister. So he's already laid down this idea that we simply aren't going to be able to understand this at all. We'll be challenged, bewildered, and confused about it. Let's just have a quick chat about what he's got around his neck. I'm always interested in what he's got there.
Yep.
One of the pendants there is the sigil of Baphomet. That's an inverted pentagram. So he's already suggesting there that he's turning things on their heads. Baphomet, by the way, from the Greek bath, basically, to be I guess bathed in wisdom, bathed in wisdom. So he's turning upside down the idea of being bathed in wisdom, overturning the usual order. Now, the other one is a little more difficult to comprehend. If you think it might be alchemical symbols, you'd kind of get magnetic lime, which doesn't really make a great deal of sense. So I'm going to suggest we have a trident there, we've got a cross, and we've got an infinity symbol. It could mean something along the lines of something of a sulfur cross, which is like a hellfire, again, cross. Kind of connects up with the Baphomet idea somewhat. What might be more interesting is the symbols there of an everlasting power over emotions, an everlasting power over emotions. So bathed in wisdom, everlasting power over emotions. Let's move forward and see how that idea plays out in the rest of the conversation with him. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I was digging into that symbology too this morning. I didn't know what they were. Well, I knew the pentagram kind of right away. I'm definitely going to talk about that later, because this plays into a very deep behavior profile for him. And we're going to talk about that. But he's concerned with his self-image. That's the number one thing here. And he's minimizing the crime using something we call severity softening. He's saying mistake instead of murder or kill or anything like that. Then we see eye closure while he's using an eyebrow flash, like the eyes close and the eyebrows go up like that, for social confirmation that time has passed. And he's using the passage of time as a strategy, probably within his own head, to say that this is a different time now. I'm not the same person. I've even got new skin cells. My organs have replaced their tissue. Maybe I'm a completely different person now. But he acknowledges this public confusion which I think shows some actual insight into how other people perceive him, which is pretty uncommon in psychopaths. We're going to see a couple more things that are uncommon. So when he's asked to explain this thought process or this rationale, you see this huge spike in blink rate. And that tells us we're seeing a stress response to this question. And none of us are mind readers, but this is probably either some difficulty with his own ability to explain what was going on, or his discomfort with revealing what's truly underneath the mask that he's wearing. And I think that's probably the case here, because we're going to see something in a few minutes that's going to show you that. He even nods his head toward Pierce when he's referring to other people, which also shows some social insight I did not expect. So a lack of empathy and self-control are something that experts are looking for when they're analyzing somebody to determine if there's maybe some psychopathy present, if they're a psychopath. They use something called the PCLR, the psychopathy checklist, which is not by any means a perfect document, by any means. The 5 psychologists can score the exact same person 5 different ways. So it's still very subjective, but it's definitely probably one of the best tools that we have to do that diagnosis. But it's not perfect, and I think too many people think that it is.
Have you ever Googled yourself and been shocked to see your personal information exposed on public listing sites? I just did a search of one of our upcoming subjects, and I was amazed to see the sensitive information exposed to me, what they earn, where they've been, and even where they live right now, and that's without even venturing onto the dark net. You see, data brokers are making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who want to learn more about you, like where you live. Our sponsor, Aura, can identify data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Now, brokers are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do that. Aura can do the hard work for you. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats you can't see. It's easy to set up. You don't have to download several different apps to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. You get everything at one affordable price. So let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online, and then you can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Don't let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information. Go to aura.com/TBP and start your 2-week free trial. Link in the description below.
Scott, what do you got?
All right. When he says villain, watch his mouth, because we see a hardcore, it's a micro expression, but we see contempt when he says villain. So that we know what his thoughts are on people calling him a villain. And then, like you were saying, Chase, severity softening. I'm this mistake I made 12 years ago. Instead of saying I murdered my sister, his answers are choppy and they're prepared. He was ready for this because he's sort of preparing for sort of nothing. He's preparing for his parole hearing, which is, maybe it's not long from there. I don't know, maybe a couple of years. I don't know what the timeline is on, but that's what he's preparing for. So this is almost like practice for him. He has a flat affect, no emotions whatsoever. He could be talking about murdering somebody, or he could be talking about a recipe for macaroni and cheese. It's the very same. Nothing happens in there from an emotional standpoint, expression-wise, that lets us know he feels anything at all, not even a little bit. Then a normal person, when they're telling the story about something they did, or when we're telling this story about something that happened, we were talking about what's it about today, and we're telling what happened, we're showing emotions on our face because it's horrifying what he did. And he shows nothing at all. Nothing. Not even a little bit. Anything. His voice doesn't crack. We don't see any grief muscle. We don't see any concern in his brow. Nothing. Just delivers and doesn't change anything at all. The only thing that sort of bothered me as I watched these videos, as we went through, he shouldn't be feeling stress. And so theoretically, from stress, his blink rate shouldn't go up. Now, there's that, which goes back to what you're saying, Chase. The checklist doesn't mean you can't go right down every time and go, this is what this means. Because one of the first studies that were happening where they started discovering what a psychopath was and be able to delineate the differences between a normal person and a psychopath. There was a test going on, and they would electrocute these people, not a whole lot, but enough to where it stung real good. And then what they do is they say, okay, we're going to count down from 10 to 1, and then we're going to give you a little shock. And they'd count down from 10 to 1. It would shock the person a lot. And they'd get all wigged out. And then as they started the countdown again, they'd be, wait a minute, hang on just a second, don't do that. And they would start stressing, and you'd see all these things that told you they were being stressed. They came across, the first guy that they came across where this happened, they shocked the crap out of him. And then they went back to 10, 9, 8. His heart rate went back to normal. No eye flutter, no nothing. Breathing rate went back down to normal until they shocked him. Then it goosed a little bit, and then it went right back down to normal, even though they were counting it down. He should be expecting this to happen, but he didn't feel that stress from that. So that's the only thing that bothers me with this. That's the first little thing that falls out of line for me, that says that he doesn't fit in the psychopath hole, or whatever you'd say, in the little box you put psychopaths in. However, I believe this guy's full-blown clinical psychopath outside of that. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, let's talk about a couple of things. Number one, when we talk about psychopathy checklist, the guy invented it. So all he's done is, by drawing circles around things, created a checklist so you could go do it. It needs some talent, to your point, Chase. It needs talent to apply, because any person can be accused of being superficial or all kinds of things. It's a matter of how you ask the questions, how you get to know, and all that. A couple of other things. This guy is walking two lines. I'll go all the way back up to the beginning and say, he says, just because I'm incarcerated doesn't mean I'm a monster or a villain. So I thought, okay, what is a villain? I went and looked it up in the dictionary, and guess what it says? A character whose evil actions or motive are important to the plot. Sounds like a villain. Sounds like he's a villain. Later, we'll hear him say he did monstrous things. So I think he contradicts himself everywhere he turns. And I think there's a whole lot of contradictory behavior in this guy because of two things. I think all this stuff around his neck, and I think, Mark, your Baphomet, by the way, is the guy who got the Templars all set on fire in 1307 because they were supposedly in some kind of ritual around him. And so the Pope and the King of France brought him in and invited him to a barbecue, cleaned them all out, got rid of them all. That's one of them. The other one, I think, is a Leviathan cross, which is usually occultish or satanic, whatever you want to call it. But all that kind of symbology you look for in certain kinds of behaviors. And that one of the things that you see people do is they wear that kind of stuff to create their own Darth Vader costume to make themselves scary. If you're in prison, you might be, pumping up lots of exercise tattoos from Aryan Nation, or you might wear some crazy Satanist stuff around your neck. I think that's one of the personas he's trying to embody here. At the same time, I think he's trying to do exactly what you all said. He's trying to come out and say, look, I'm a normal human being. I'm just a regular everyday guy because his probation's coming up or his parole's coming up. Well, that's a tough line to walk, coming out with satanic symbology, looking a little creepy to start with. I can speak to the same thing. We both could try out for Uncle Fester. I think he wins. But as you look at him, he comes out that way. It's really difficult to come out and look normal with all that around. He should have taken it off. Okay. Then we did a show called Erin Caffey. She's a little girl who killed her family and set fire to the house. He starts off with his eyes in really rigid blink until he says something and punctuates with them. And I think that something was mistake I made. The only time we see any brow rise or any of that kind of thing, 12 years ago. That means that's meaningful to him. All this lockdown that he's created goes away. So we're going to pay attention and look for when that normal brow movement starts to say he's trying to make some points. What do they matter? I also think he does a couple of other really interesting things. Then when there's the rest of the time his face is flat affect, all of that. But there's a narrowing of his eyes and a jut of his jaw. And he exposes lower teeth before he answers that one question about why should people see it that way. Then I put my one comment says he does a Richard Ramirez school of chaff through pontification and redirect. He starts right down that path that the Night Stalker used, some kind of ideology, and then spats it out. I think what we're seeing is a guy who's got two different personas he needs to play, and he's going to have a hell of a time keeping the two up. That's all I saw.
The origin of the term villain was a pagan word for the pagans that lived out in the forests or, whatever, tree houses and stuff. But they would refer to the people who lived in all the villages as villains, as the enemy.
Never heard that one. That's neat.
Mm-hmm. So point of order. that is a Leviathan cross. What he
with
has,
a fork at the top.
what he has is a trident
on
top of it.
Yeah. Which is,
I found one or two, Mark, when I was looking for them, and it looked like some kind of a trade-off. It's an occultic symbol.
It's a sigil, so it's been put together on a. Exactly. It may well be mass-produced. He may not have put it together himself quite lightly, but it's not a usual configuration.
The only thing I found was something to do with chaos. So, anytime you're dealing with that kind of symbology, you just try to find something.
Well, it may be a
just
modern
a way to set himself aside.
chaos magic symbol. Something. But again, that will have been invented by a specific magician or him.
Yeah, it's his voodoo symbology. He's going to scare you off with it. That's what I think. There's Merle Haggard in his book wrote about a little bitty guy who was scared of people getting on him, and he would take excrement and rub it all over him and call himself
That'll do the job.
Fred. He called himself Fred. So this is his version of that. He's going to put all this stuff on and scare people off.
Yeah.
One of those tape replays.
My first question for you is, why are you doing this interview? What do you hope to get out of this?
I believe that the most important goal for me is to show people that I may be incarcerated, but that does not necessarily mean that I am a monster or a villain. That the mistake I made 12 years ago at the age of 13 is not something that defines my life.
I've seen video footage. I've seen still photographs of you together. You playing the role of perhaps protective older brother, her as the cheeky, mischievous younger sister. Can you rationalize or explain now how you came to do what you did to your sister?
I don't think I can easily explain everything, because if I could, we wouldn't be talking about it 12 years later. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges for other people through the years, because no one likes to be confused. No one likes to be bewildered. We like easy answers.
From what I've read, you were weighing up various options. One was to potentially kill the babysitter. One was to kill your mother, with whom you had lots of anger towards. And the other was to kill your sister. And in the end, you determined that if you killed your sister, but didn't kill your mother, that your mother would then live her life with the agony of losing her little girl. And that might be a bigger punishment than killing your mother. Is that a fair characterization of your thinking?
Yes, it is. For many, many years, there was just this hot, flaming ball of wrath in the pit of my stomach, and it was directed at my mother. And one of the reasons why I chose to kill my sister and not someone else is because I knew that by doing so, I could hurt my mother in the worst possible way. Because I had always known as a child that the most devastating thing to my mother would be the loss of one of her children. And I found a way to take away both her children in one fell swoop.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so he starts off with a set jaw and a narrowing of his mouth, along with some intake breath that shows me some kind of containment. Now, that containment, my guess, is anger based on a couple of things that we can see here. And we see a lip compression. And that lip compression, we always say, is withholding information. And it can be profound in withholding feelings as well as spoken word. We watch him, his blink rate increases. He's getting prodded and poked by peers. He does that little mouth grooming thing, which we typically associate as an adapter, a way to relieve nervous energy or stress. When I see all that in this guy and I know what kind of persona he's baked, I probably would go in on him and poke him a little bit. But Pierce doesn't, because I think he's waiting for a later time to do it. He does a good job of letting him go. I think I would have poked him early just to get him spun up a little bit and see what he came back at. Usually you're going to get more information, real information in an interrogation if you don't spin people up. But if you've got somebody who's holding court, like Ramirez, I would have poked him, because if you poke him, he'll get angry and come back at you. This is a chance to see whether this guy would be angry or not. Then he says, I found a way to take both her children. This is the second time we see him do that brow rise, and this is an important thing for him to get across to you. I don't know whether it's true that he was thinking that, don't have any idea, but he gets really curt and narrows his mouth and does, Chase, I think you usually call it quick mouth close, right at the end of that word swoop. Look at her face when she has surprise, when he talks about having a ball of wrath and that kind of thing. I think this is him, something he's learned in prison, learned to be this contained. My guess is when he was a kid, he probably wasn't this way. We see a few pieces of footage with him with this baby. And there's one of the places in the videos in the show where he's with this little girl and he's playing with her and they ask something about, don't you love your little sister? And he shows disgust. So he's got some patterns of behavior that he's probably had to learn to put down. Because, you get to prison, you got guards, you got other prisoners to deal with. You have to contain yourself a little more than he has probably had to do in his past. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Again, and I agree with everything you said, and I'm not going to go over the things you just went over because I had a lot of those as well. But it's flat affect. He's talking about something that is horrific, and he shows no emotion whatsoever. We get nothing out of this guy. His blink rate goes up during the question. So again, that takes me back to the part about stress. It may be something. Gosh, look at that plant back there. You guys watching that? Changes colors or something? Must be this.
It's on your end.
Or something.
Not here.
That's weird. Anyway, so I think it must be something's up in there. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying he's not a psychopath at all. There's no doubt in my mind. I put all my chips on. That's what he is. I'm just saying that this is one thing that little red flag that's not a red flag, just something that sticks out that's abnormal for a psychopath, in my opinion. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so Piers often does a great job, I think. Here's a great example where he puts forward an idea to Bennett and says, is this a fair characterization of your thinking? And from Bennett, we get, yes, it is. We get a nod of the head and a slow blink from him. That's enough for me to go, well, Bennett might not tell us the truth all the time. And he's probably going to create a lot of personas, to fit the image that he wants to put forward. And actually, the production will probably soak up that because it's a useful persona for them to make a good drama out of this. And we'll see that in our next video. But Piers is often good enough to put forward an idea whereby you can see the reaction, and the reaction is one that's positive. And so I can't remember what it is Piers says before. Is this a fair characterization? I would go back and listen to that and see what he says, because I think Bennett to that is in full truthful agreement of what's been said. Now, then he comes up with something which is super dramatic and lyrical, of a hot flaming ball of wrath in the pit of my stomach. You couldn't get more demonic than that. And we'll see later on what kind of stuff he first puts forward that he reads, and later on some of the other stuff that he puts forward that he reads. But he clearly is a fan of the horror genre, and that is something straight from the pits of hell. And of course they're going to use that because it really does set up this idea of evil, because I think that is something that this particular show is going to want to sell us, because it is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if we are challenged and bewildered and confused by why somebody would do this, then maybe it's very easy for us to go to the idea of there is good and there's evil, and this one's evil, and it's as simple as that. I'm not saying he's not incredibly sadistic and the most horrific person you probably ever come across, but it's maybe a little more complex for my money than the ideal of evil. Chase, what do you got on this one?
I agree with y'all. And here we're seeing, I think, honest behavior. I'm not seeing a lot of deception or stress markers, but there's some resignation about having to go into detail about all this. But we're also seeing him describe his feelings using those words, Mark, like you said, hot, which are suggestive of someone who's a feeling thinker. That means they use words that describe a lot of feelings. And a good interrogator is going to start hearing that and then using those words back to that person to help them become more open and more connected to them. And we're going to look for language to confirm that. One thing here that I think a lot of people are going to miss is that we're seeing the application of true emotional intelligence. So we're seeing him use this emotional intelligence in a manipulative way. And it might be something that we should look for in the next videos. If you're a future profiler or if you're a panelist, you subscribe to our videos, you'll definitely want to look at that. So we're also seeing careful planning instead of impulsivity, which is what he's talking about, which I definitely did not expect. So one of the elements on the PCLR, this psychopathy checklist, is impulsivity. Here, we're seeing him actually describe the feeling, this ball of fire for a long time, and calculating emotional damage. And most people will score, just as a quick idea of this, a 5 or a 6 on the checklist, most people. And psychopaths will score higher than a 25. So there's a marked difference between those two. That's all I got.
One of those tape replays.
From what I've read, you were weighing up various options. One was to potentially kill the babysitter. One was to kill your mother, with whom you had lots of anger towards. And the other was to kill your sister. And in the end, you determined that if you killed your sister, but didn't kill your mother, that your mother would then live her life with the agony of losing her little girl. And that might be a bigger punishment than killing your mother. Is that a fair characterization of your thinking?
Yes, it is. For many, many years, there was just this hot, flaming ball of wrath in the pit of my stomach, and it was directed at my mother. And one of the reasons why I chose to kill my sister and not someone else is because I knew that by doing so, I could hurt my mother in the worst possible way. Because I had always known as a child that the most devastating thing to my mother would be the loss of one of her children. And I found a way to take away both her children in one fell swoop.
You have a very good memory, I'm told, like really almost a photographic memory of stuff. Do you remember the day of the murder very acutely? Is it a very vivid memory?
I remember impressions more than I do vivid memories. It's not like there's a film in my head that I can just play whenever I want to. That's really all I can say about it. There are parts that are very, very clear, and there are parts that are hard to remember.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
So in my notes, it says he goes down to internal dialogue where there should be severe emotion in most people until you realize this video is reversed. It's backwards. So that little mole under his left eye is actually under his right eye. So when you're seeing him go into down left, that's down right. So that is actually emotional accessing. If you type his name onto Google Images, you'll see that mole is directly under his right eye. So when kids are around 12, there's a slowdown in something that we call synaptogenesis. And this is just a fancy way of saying that the brain's neurons aren't linking up as quickly as before. And this can cause a few bumps in the road, I think, for a brain that's still growing, especially in the frontal lobe. So now if psychopathy is also here, things get a little more complicated. You've got an underdeveloped frontal lobe. Then there's the amygdala and this other thing called the insula, which are smaller than usual, both of those in most psychopaths. So the amygdala is kind of tucked away super deep in the temporal lobe. It's kind of like our emotional control center, and it's kind of how we react to social stuff. And then there's the insula that's inside the cerebral cortex. It's like our body's kind of emotional weather station. It helps us to feel things like love and anger and fear and anxiety. So when these areas aren't fully developed or are smaller than usual in a developing brain like this, it can really contribute to a perfect storm, leading to a spike in violent behavior, potentially. But in the video, we're seeing half blinks. I want you to pay attention to that when the video goes back up. The eyelid doesn't close all the way. And this is target lock behavior. This is the body, not him consciously thinking this. This is the body wanting to keep the target in view as much as possible. That's why the eye is not closing all the way. And right when he says it's hard to remember, there's contempt at the end of this. There's contempt on his face. Contempt at just saying hard to remember. Just take that and think about the personality behind somebody who would be contemptuous while they were saying it's hard to remember. And they show that contempt on their face. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, agree with you. And one of the things that's interesting here is if you want to know what limbic thought looks like, what a person who has gone and done something rage-filled or whatever kind of crazy you want to know, and they're trying to remember it, all you have to do is try to remember your last automobile accident or something that happened to you that was stressful and turned off your thinking brain. What he's describing here is exactly that. He's describing this thing happened. Yeah, I did it. I can't remember exactly the order things went in. And Chase, it's appropriate that he would be probably over in the emotional, regardless whether he has any feelings for the person or not. There's probably emotion associated with the fact I can't remember, boom, boom, boom. And he goes to a slower cadence. We usually associate that slower cadence and loss of fluency with being out of the thinking brain. Whereas if you're over here, you're going to go to slower cadence and be more methodical in your process as you're halting and you're working through it. This is him trying to recall this, and I really do believe he can't remember the order things went in, and he's trying to explain that loss. That's all I got. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so really interesting. You notice that mirror reversal there, because it's not the only shot that it happens in, but not all of the shots are reversed. So there's a choice happening here. Let's look at the analysts. The analysts in this video, which is different from other videos, and also they'll do the same, the two different shots in one scene. The analysts are reversed. If you look at the Sony logo, it's backwards. Now, if you put two mirrored shots in one scene, it's very disconcerting for an audience, but the audience won't quite know why. So either you're doing it to be disconcerting, or either you're doing it because you wish you'd bought more cameras and you're trying to create the idea of more angles and up the production value. Well, given that, so which one is it? So given that he says, I remember, and he really slows down for that bit, they've got a lovely bit of that. And then we go to a shot of a foggy street and a street lamp and the camera panning up the road towards the door. That's The Exorcist. So go and look at The Exorcist poster, and you'll see the same image used by William Friedkin, who was copying Fritz Lang, the German expressionist. They are clearly playing immediately into one of the classics of the supernatural horror genre. Immediately, I remember. And then he says, it's not a film in my head, while they're playing classic images from one of the most horrifying films ever made. So, interesting what they're doing there. We've had this setup of hot flaming ball of wrath in the pit of my stomach. And now we're going to some classic images from the classics of horror. So I can kind of see the way they're wanting to push us on this towards the idea, which The Exorcist put forward, which was there is such a thing as evil. It actually exists. There is no psychological way to explain this. It's a supernatural causation. Scott, what have you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. They're trying to make this look really scary on the outside. On the inside, watching them is pretty scary.
Yeah.
When you had all the other stuff, the dark and all that, yeah, you're right. That's really scary. I could add a bunch of stuff that would be around your guys' stuff, orbiting it really small. So I'll keep this short because everybody's nailed pretty much what I got. But what I'm seeing is, again, the same flat affect, nothing really happening outside of what happens with a psychopath. I'm still, it's as enlightening because we're seeing things that psychopaths don't do. You guys were talking about the emotional things he must be going through as he's doing this, which those shouldn't come into play. So that's the part that's, for me, a little bumping up against what we know as a true clinical psychopath, which I think what this guy is. So let's see what happens next.
One of those tape replays.
You have a very good memory, I'm told, like really almost a photographic memory of stuff. Do you remember the day of the murder very acutely? Is it a very vivid memory?
I remember impressions more than I do vivid memories. It's not like there's a film in my head that I can just play whenever I want to. That's really all I can say about it. There are parts that are very, very clear, and there are parts that are hard to remember.
At what point in that day had you decided you were going to kill somebody?
It wasn't like I was crafting a plan to rob a bank where I knew that at this time I'm going to do this, and then at this other time I'm going to do the other thing. I think that a deeper, darker part of me, a part that doesn't express itself in articulate words, I think it knew what it was going to do, and I understand that I'm completely depersonalizing a part of my own mind right now. But I think I understood in an intuitive way that I was going to do something. I was caught up in a current, and I was just being swept along.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yep, so underneath that, we've got this Schoenberg-esque music as well. Again, German expressionist. We're still keeping the horror idea. We've got that beautiful lip compression there. So clearly he's going to hold something back from us there. I'd love to hear what people think. Well, first, do we have agreement on that? And then what might he be holding back there? But certainly to the latter part of this, he's intelligent about all the arguments that would be put against his idea of a deeper, darker part and the compartmentalization of that, and his potential idea of being swept along. So possession, hysteria. He's going, look, I realize you'd have an argument with that. And because I realize that, I mean, clearly that must be the case. It must have been that, because I wouldn't put that forward realizing that you'd be able to go, actually, I mean, don't compartmentalize this. It's all you. There aren't two parts of you. It's all you. So he's already started this idea of going, look, it's not all me. There's an old me, there's a different me, there's a Jekyll, there's a Hyde, and like you can't, one shouldn't be punished for the other. And I realized the argument you'd have against that, and because I realized that, obviously I'm telling you the truth. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I've dealt with this in an interrogation room before, and I've always asked the question, like, how many brains do you have? Okay, well, there's our answer. That's how many people we're dealing with. Just as a quick pro tip, one of the fastest ways you can determine if you're dealing with somebody who's toxic, not even a psychopath, is to understand two things which you can accomplish really fast in most conversations. Number one, do they have long-term friends who live nearby? Do they have friends that live nearby? So you want to establish if they have long-term relationships with people who care about them early on, which is really easy to do. And number two, how do they respond to criticism? So as early as possible, you want to identify how they respond to maybe criticism and disrespect. So we're seeing this emotional intelligence here again, and we're seeing him recite some education from maybe books or maybe therapists that he's had, and he explains this incredibly well. He does a great job at communicating this and putting it into our head. His eyes are moving in multiple directions here, and that's meaningless if you're using the eye accessing chart that you see online, or you're thinking that, he's using his creative and logic brain, all that kind of stuff. But what it does tell you is that he's going to multiple places in his own mind to access this data, this information. And it's an indicator of honesty here. And for some of this, for a piece of this, when you see the eyes move, it's likely pretty well thought out. But being well thought out does not mean that it's deceptive. So notice he's not doing the half blinking anymore. His eyes are closing all the way, almost this entire clip. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, a couple of things. Most of the reason we don't talk eye movement on the show is because we don't control the questions. And if you ask questions that are not closed-ended and you can't drive a person to answer and watch where their eyes go, you can't do eye movement. And most of these questions are too open-ended. They're just moving around and doing all kinds of stuff. And that's the same thing here. The thing I think we can see here is we can see him moving his eyes all around. He's at least accessing down here and up there. But what we can see is that he starts to get comfortable. When he rationalizes, after he rationalizes and he thinks you bought into that, look at how he starts to move differently, and he's using his hands and he's illustrating, he's actually speaking. This is what he came here to say. This is one of his messages. We'll see others, that brow thing we've been seeing, but this is a message, and you can tell because illustrators come up. He's starting to punctuate what he's thinking. When this happens, what you want to be able to do is lean over and start feeding him a little bit more data and say, well, tell me more about that. Get him talking, give him the reins. When you're in an interrogation room and you get a person to where they break that baseline of lockdown and tight, that's when you want to start feeding them. You would use elicitation techniques, flattery, criticism, you name it. We would start poking and prodding, and we'd get something out of it. I think this is one of the rare occasions we're going to see him actually lift his hands, illustrate, and think. Scott, what do you got?
And I think that's because he's getting excited because he's rehearsed this stuff. He's ready. We're looking at a manipulative little you-know-what here. So he's studying how to get out on parole. That's what's happening. He's rehearsing it right here in front of us. It's great for him to be doing this interview. And he's being interviewed by Piers Morgan. And he's asking some good questions. And we see some awesome questions as we go along in here. But he tries to make this murder look like it was spur of the moment, like it just happened. He didn't but it wasn't, because he planned it. He thought about it a long time, and he talked that babysitter into leaving. Yeah, that's what happened. Excuse me. So he talked the babysitter into leaving. Then he killed his sister. So this is a full-on psychopath we're seeing here, and he's prepping to get out.
One of those tape replays.
At what point in that day had you decided you were going to kill somebody?
It wasn't like I was crafting a plan to rob a bank where I knew that at this time I'm going to do this, and then at this other time I'm going to do the other thing. I think that a deeper, darker part of me, a part that doesn't express itself in articulate words, I think it knew what it was going to do. And I understand that I'm completely depersonalizing a part of my own mind right now. But I think I understood in an intuitive way that I was going to do something. I was caught up in a current, and I was just being swept along.
Once the babysitter had left, there was just you and Ella in the house, and she was asleep at that stage. Is that right? And you take a large knife and you go into her room and you stab her twice at the start of this process. When that happened, you could have saved her. You could have called the 911, the emergency services. That moment is very interesting to me about the calculation you made then to continue when you had hesitated and could have spared her.
I remember that. And I remember that it was like I was struggling with myself. And this isn't meant to suggest that I hear voices or that I'm crazy or anything, but it's almost like one part of me was the part of me that knew what I was doing was wrong. It was the part that loved my sister and would have turned the world upside down for her. And the other part was the wounded, twisted, dark part, the part that had been in pain for so long and wanted misery loves company. It was the part of me that wanted to cause pain, to take the pain I had been feeling and give it to someone else. And I remember that even during the time that I was stabbing her, I was struggling with myself to stop. But I just didn't struggle hard enough. I didn't put up a good enough fight against myself. And I remember thinking once I had started that it was too late. I couldn't stop. I remember thinking that I have to see it through to the end.
Right, I'll go first on this one. I'm going to talk about something psychopaths do, and it's common predatory behavior with them. When you look at when he's looking at peers, and Chase, you got close to this the last time, he's scanning his face. He's looking at him, and he's looking for little things that tell him he's afraid. The only thing psychopaths really recognize from an emotional standpoint is fear. And when they see it, their eyes dilate a little bit, their pupils dilate a little bit. So this guy's like an animal. He's looking for weakness right here. This is just a body running around with nobody in it. That's what's happening here. So when I referred to people before who are psychopaths, who have killed a lot of people, or they've done some horrible things, I call them it. That's what I'm talking about. This is just a body running around trying to please itself, find things to make it feel better or something to do. So that's why I refer to him as it, and him as well. Remember when we saw Pierce talking to Rebecca Fenton? Mm-hmm. And he was in the same room with her, no problem with it at all, wasn't afraid of anything. They've got this guy in another room with a glass thing and bars there. So what does that tell you? They think this guy could hurt him because they're not going to let him near him. So they see him as violent and an animal as well, because I don't know his background in prison. I don't know what he's done. You know, he looks like he's in pretty good shape. He could fight pretty good, I think. You'd be more along the lines to talk about that, Greg, than me. But he looks like he's ready to go, you know, at any time. And I think this is some classic predatorial behavior we're seeing in him as he's looking at Pierce. So watch his eyes as they dart around. You'll see him move really small and versions of that, but you'll see him scan his face because he's looking for something. He's looking for emotions that tell him that Pierce is afraid or that he's weak. He's looking for weakness. Chase, what do you got?
So during all of this, he has really low shutter speed. So you hear us talk about blink rate all the time here. Blink rate is how often you blink. Shutter speed is how fast. So what we're talking about is how fast does the eyelid close and then open back up. And if you want to understand what that means in 5 seconds, think about the eyelid speed difference between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane.
Did you say Chihuahua?
Yeah. How do you
Chihuahua? I've never heard anybody say Chihuahua that wasn't a cartoon. I was hearing Chihuahua. He's a Chihuahua. Chihuahua.
He's a Chihuahua.
So, anyway, sorry, dude. I couldn't know it.
This, his acknowledgement that part of him knew what he was doing was wrong indicates a level of some moral awareness, maybe, which is atypical in classic psychopathy, where there's usually a total lack of moral understanding. And I think this admission is pretty significant, as I think it points to us that there's a level of self-awareness about his capacity for self-control. And everything looks pretty honest here. And when I say honest, that doesn't always mean that he's being authentic and open about everything. So I can give you half the truth and still be honest. So just remember that. So everything was normal until during the question about the crime. While he's talking about the crime, we see a large uptick in blink rate, which is a stress response. We're blinking more often. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think you just hit dead on what we always talk about, whether it's fourth walling or something else. Improv versus acting. When you're acting, you come to deliver a message. When you're improving, you respond to the crowd. You respond to inputs. I think we're seeing acting. I agree with you. I think he can give you a half truth and not lie, and so it makes him more comfortable. I also think just because he can say these words, this is a great opportunity for us to talk about all psychopaths are not smart. This one is, but a lot of them are not. And so they won't learn the right things to say and the right things to do and the right stuff. This guy, I think, Chase, you're all over it. This guy is saying what I think he wants people to hear, and he's looking for people to respond. The more interesting thing to me is watch him and watch his mother. When he disapproves and shows a little anger, she does exactly the same facial expressions. Now, Scott, we're back to mimicry. What a beautiful thing to see where he learned to move his face the way he does. Some of it's musculature, but some of it's learned, and we know that from children. I always say, if you want to know how a parent lies, watch the kid lie, because they learn to lie from their parents. All that kind of movement. There are a couple of really interesting things. He's in data intake phase, is what I call that flat face. I do it all the time myself. There's nothing wrong with that if you come to life when it's over. But if you're always in that flat state, it's really difficult to look friendly or for people to approach you. And he doesn't accept any of the violence that he just is saying, you did this, you stabbed her 17 times. What does he say? I remember that. I remember that. That's why you know there's nobody there, Scott, to your point. He can pretend the rest of the stuff, but I remember that. I remember stabbing. Again, Chase, I think you're really good with the point you made earlier. The eye movement's all over the place but there is one thing that indicates something is different in his head. He goes to a brand new place when he's asked a conjecture question, and it's off over here to his right in the video we're seeing. So it means something is changing in the way he was responding to the question. And then there's that persuasion brow again, and he looks under his brow this time as he says, I love my sister and would have torn the world apart. There's another message he's trying to deliver. Then at the end, there's another request for approval. I want to know why those are occurring. I just know they are occurring. So something's going on. He's trying to get a message across. And I think what we're doing is seeing, mean little Johnny versus wanting parole little Johnny. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so he's certainly putting forward the idea of there being two Johnnies. So the multiple personality theory, or certainly the multiple facets of the personality theory that says what he says. First of all, I remember that. Then there's a long gap. It's like, come on. Like, tell me, if you got memories, say the memories. And then he repeats it. I remember. And then there's another long gap. Oh, seems like you're finding it hard to get those memories, or certainly get them in the way that you think is going to be acceptable for us. Here's his message. Like I was struggling with myself. So so to struggle with yourself, there has to be the you that's having the battle with the other. So he's put forward the idea of there's two personalities that I have, but he says it's like it. So it wasn't actually, if it was actually, he'd say, I remember I was struggling with myself, and that you'd go, okay, good metaphor, which might actually have been a reality for you at the time. No, like I was struggling with myself. Then he says, it wasn't like it wasn't like I was hearing voices. Oh, so you're saying you're not psychotic? Well, that's really helpful. So thanks very much for that, because now we know it wasn't a psychotic episode, or certainly you're not diagnosing yourself. Because some people would go down that line and go, look, I had all these voices in my head and they were telling me to do it. And now you'd be able to go, okay, there's a potentially psychosis or psychotic episode there going on. I mean, that's now there's something reasonable that we can look further into. Then he goes again, almost like a battle between love and pain. I've made up the idea of pain, but I think what he's trying to do is hit a kind of a Paradise Lost kind of idea there of it's a big battle that he's in. It's not just the battle between two versions of him. It's that epic battle of Lucifer and God, love and pain. There's good and there's evil, and it's always going to be that grand narrative, but it's almost like that. So it's actually not that. So it's none of these things. It's none of these things. It's not an epic battle. It's not a multiple personality, and it's not psychosis. So now we beg the question of like, well, what is it really then? I mean, what's really going on? What's really going on here? Then he puts forward the idea, I did not put up a good enough fight against myself. So he's still doing that fight in heaven, or that fight in hell. Well, certainly it points towards, if we're just going to go with myself, certainly points to a lack of self-regulation there. Because look, what we do know about psychopaths is not by no means all of them commit violent acts. In fact, most don't commit violent acts, and therefore you don't know most psychopaths because they've got a way of dealing with the world and you not really knowing that. And it's okay, actually, because they're not going to kill anybody. Okay. Why? Because they do have some self-regulation. They are able to look at the world and go, you know what, it wouldn't be to my best advantage. I know I'm feeling like this, but I'm I'm feeling aggressive or violent or upset or, because there are some emotions there, just not in the same way that we would have them, because ours come at different points and we regulate them in different ways, and we feel them when they wouldn't feel them at all. So it's a different plumbing system. It's a different regulation system, has to deal with that. Well, it sounds to me like he's got about zero regulation on this, zero regulation. So yeah, he did not put up a good fight against himself. I'd say that's pretty accurate if you just say, yeah, you didn't regulate your violent, aggressive feelings towards and more towards your sister at that point. That's all I got on that one. Let's have another.
Quite often what they talk about when they're talking about why some psychopaths aren't violent is because of the way they're raised. Because they haven't seen violence, they don't know violence, they just know the pleasant things.
One of those tape replays.
Once the babysitter had left, there was just you and Ella in the house, and she was asleep at that stage. Is that right? And you take a large knife and you go into her room and you stab her twice at the start of this process. When that happened, you could have saved her. You could have called the 911, the emergency services. That moment is very interesting to me about the calculation you made then to continue when you had hesitated and could have spared her.
I remember that. And I remember that it was like I was struggling with myself. And this isn't meant to suggest that I hear voices or that I'm crazy or anything, but it's almost like one part of me was the part of me that knew what I was doing was wrong. It was the part that loved my sister and would have turned the world upside down for her. And the other part was the wounded, twisted, dark part, the part that had been in pain for so long and wanted misery loves company. It was the part of me that wanted to cause pain, to take the pain I had been feeling and give it to someone else. And I remember that even during the time that I was stabbing her, I was struggling with myself to stop. But I just didn't struggle hard enough. I didn't put up a good enough fight against myself. And I remember thinking once I had started that it was too late. I couldn't stop. I remember thinking that I have to see it through to the end.
Your sister Ella was just a young girl, obviously. What were your feelings towards her as her brother, her older brother?
We could sit here and talk all day about my feelings for my sister. A description of my feelings isn't something that I can give you in the brief time that we have together, because I loved her. I loved her with every fiber of my being.
But you say that in the present tense?
Yes.
I mean, she's dead because you killed her?
Yes.
But you love her?
Yes, I do.
Do you think you understand what love is? I mean, are you capable?
I don't really know how to answer that question. And I'm not saying that to be difficult or stubborn, but it's not simple. So I can't just point at something and say, okay, that's love. I recognize it easily, and I feel that.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Patrol. Okay. Yeah, so there's a head bob and more pontificating, because he asked him a question about feelings. I don't think the guy has the capability to describe a feeling. You're going to see it compound further in to the point that it almost becomes comical. His persuasion faces back, that whole brow up and all that I loved her. And then he says present tense. He says, you use the present tense, and his face almost is like, what? And I just said, even a blind squirrel can find a nut occasionally. I don't think he did it intentionally. I think it's just this is one of those cases where I always say, sometimes people they don't think, they interchange tenses without thinking about it. I've been in places where people are switching tenses constantly. It's just because of education or because of that. And he's, by the way, been in prison for this long. I don't know. Just because you read a lot doesn't mean that you're always going to use things the correct way. He shifted his head at one point to an oblique, kind of with a stiff neck, and went to a narrow mouth when he went after him. So I see that as kind of this looks like a challenge to me, and I'm going to come back at you, but he doesn't. He looks like he's about to fry a circuit trying to figure out feelings and describe them, doing all that mouth movement. And I associate that mouth movement with, if you have children, when they're coloring and they sit and move their tongue around their mouth, that's humans do that. Mammals do that. Horses move their mouth when they're thinking. We have to be taught as children, as humans, not to do that so that people can't take advantage of us or we don't look silly. You could imagine, CEOs standing there going, give me a minute. What would you think? So we have to teach people not to do that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes in interviews, Piers Morgan needs to back off. In this one, he's just sensational. He's just lovely because he puts him right in the corner there and annoys, I think, the hell out of him, calling him out on this love and loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Mark.
For sure.
Fascinating.
One of your best.
Genuinely.
You just froze for a little bit.
Oh, how long? Enough that
8 seconds, probably. Yeah.
8 seconds. Wow. Okay.
You could write a bull for that.
I'll let people imagine what was going. Imagine the best ever analysis you've ever heard. That's what happened in those 8 seconds. Missing. Right down below what you think it was. Look, the subject here, Bennett says, I can't just point at something and say that's love. Actually, most people can. They'll give it a go. I mean, they'll give it a shot. They might not be right. There may be more eloquent ways of saying it. They may correct that and go, yeah, I'm not sure I really put my finger on it there. But they will give a good stab at it, even if it's like, it's just that feeling that I get when this, or for me, it's this, or they'll give it, or they'll say, hey, here's what I've heard it is, and I'm not sure it's that for me, but they'll give it a good enough go. He's just going, I'm not even going there on that, and that is odd.
I think even Ozzy Osbourne has some love lyrics. You could listen.
Absolutely. Some say all the best love songs are metal songs. I don't know whether that's true. Scott Rouse, is that true?
Yes,
Good.
It is true. So I think this is fascinating as well as textbook for a psychopath, because when he asks him that question about his love for his sister as an older brother, he it's almost like he's been smacked. He reacts to that because his brain almost flips out. He has nothing for that. As much as he's read about in the DSM, as much as he's found out about what's wrong with him, all that, he can't describe love. He doesn't understand that, and that's why I think that's. When this thing first starts and he first asks him that question, pay attention, because you'll see him. His head's almost like he's been smacked a little bit. He goes back. That says it all to me. I should stop right there. I'm not going to. So the reason, and quite often people say, "Why I can't believe someone would do that. He would do that to somebody, or they would kill all these people. They would do all this, and it's just horrific." It's because their brain doesn't know it's horrific. It doesn't bother them at all, not even a little bit, because they don't have the equipment in there working, in other words, working properly that allows them to feel empathetic toward a person. Sympathy and empathy are two different things. Sympathy is when you feel sorry for somebody. You go, oh, man, that's horrible. Oh, shit, happened. I'm sure it hurts. But when someone's empathetic, if you're being empathetic, you try to imagine your thumb getting hit by the hammer like that person just did. You go, oh, man, and you'll do that and look at it. That's gotta hurt. So that's the difference in sympathy and empathy. So psychopaths have no sympathy, and they obviously have no empathy, which this guy doesn't, because he doesn't understand love. So again, at the top of this, watch him almost wince as his head goes, just almost like he's been smacked. Fascinating study here. If you want to look at a real psychopath, you're looking at one when you look at that guy. Chase, what do you got?
Reminds me of the song from Night at the Roxbury. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
And that's Chase Hughes. Welcome to the Midnight Storm. You know, a lot of times I'll think...
Our next letter is from Tiffany in Wisconsin.
And now Kate Bush.
The top 14,000 countdown.
When I watched this morning, if you noticed, this is the clip where the mole on his face magically transforms back onto the other side. Right. I had to stand up and walk around the office because I thought I'd been reading everything wrong the whole time. And then I went back to the previous clip. This is when I realized everything. And in the last clip, his mole's under his left eye, and this one, it magically moves to his right eye. The editors reversed the image. Maybe it wasn't even the editing. Maybe it's somebody who did this where we got the video. But when he's saying I love her, the eyes are not going down and to the right. As you're seeing in this video, they're going down left or maybe down to his right. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. But it's interesting if they are going down right, which I think they might be, because I think that mole in this video is in the right place.
I think it is.
There's actual emotion there. So when he says this, he also raises an eyebrow, and asymmetry and the down right eye movement is unusual to see here. It's not a huge cluster, but it is certainly a cluster of behavior that suggests somebody might not be giving us the whole story. And keep in mind, if I ask you a question about love and your eyes go down right, that doesn't mean that you're feeling love. Anger and hatred and all of those nasty things are also emotions. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward here. Mark, what do you got?
I've been.
Greg,
we've all been. We've all been.
All right. Chase.
So as a point of order, Chase, all the cameras are on Pierce's right-hand side.
This is the captain of dyslexia telling us this.
Yeah. So any shot where it looks like you're looking over his left shoulder has been reversed. I would suggest, because when you look at the wide shot, you can see all the cameras set up on one side. They could have only run it twice. They can't have flipped the camera over to the other side. So they're flipping in order to look like they have more cameras, but they don't.
It makes it not reliable is the biggest thing, Chase. So you nailed it right up front. I think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
One of those tape replays.
Your sister Ella was just a young girl, obviously. What were your feelings towards her as her brother, her older brother?
We could sit here and talk all day about my feelings for my sister. A description of my feelings isn't something that I can give you in the brief time that we have together, because I loved her. I loved her with every fiber of my being.
But you say that in the present tense?
Yes.
I mean, she's dead because you killed her.
Yes.
But you love her?
Yes, I do.
Do you think you understand what love is? I mean, are you capable?
I don't really know how to answer that question. And I'm not saying that to be difficult or stubborn, but it's not simple. So I can't just point at something and say, okay, that's love. I recognize it easily, and I feel that.
But you had done this specifically in the end.
Yes.
To cause your mother maximum pain. This has achieved your goal, which was to effectively mean your mother lost both her children at once. One to death, one to incarceration. When you saw her completely grief-stricken and in utter torment, that is what you were hoping to achieve by your actions. So I'm just curious whether the reality of what you hope to achieve lived up to your expectation or hope.
No. At no point did I ever feel like I had accomplished something or that I had achieved a goal. And one of the reasons why it's so hard for me to talk about how I felt at that time is because I'm completely estranged from who I was then, and I just now I can't comprehend how I could ever have thought that killing my sister would solve my problems. It's like we're here talking about a completely different person. It's like you're asking me to try to climb inside someone else's head and peer through his eyes and catalog his thought.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
If you have ever heard us talk about this thing called the chin boss muscle right here on our chin, you know that it's associated with grief and maybe shame. And you'll see a very saddening example of this looking at Paris's mom while she's watching her son here. And it's unmistakable it's so unmistakable, I'm going to be using this in training. And at this point, we can hear the manipulative strategy at play. He's got his story ready to go. He's selling us on the theory of dissociation and detachment and removal and separation from both the person and the action. So in forensic psychology, according to the textbooks, I'm not a psychologist, but I can read textbooks. You want to look at the difference between those two things, and that's a big deal. And now even the memories of that person are being separated. So person, memories, and actions. So it's everything that makes us a human is separated at this point. So he's layering all of this. What I do think is fascinating is that he's trying to portray a very composed and rational person to the world, but he's wearing this weird, whatever it is, satanic regalia, whatever it is, around his neck with his skill in social manipulation. As a behavior profiler, I'm wondering why he would make that decision and not try to be Mr. Perfect. So, but listen to how he speaks about his old self in third person. This is textbook narrative weaving and manipulation. Scott, what do you got?
I agree with you 100%. This is a squirrely little cat we're dealing with, man. I'm not, it's exciting, I think, to see this guy, to be this up close to it and have peers asking these questions that are so good. We see him get fired up here in a couple of minutes.
They are good.
Not peers, but Paris. So again, in the replay, watch his eyes, watch Paris's eyes, because he's looking at peers trying to find weakness. It's the only emotion they really recognize and go, oh, I know what that is instantly, right? So he reacts to that when he sees, now, I think he's got a tick. I think he's got a tick with his eyes, because if you watch him, now that we've talked about the switching of the right and left and all that, watch his eyes. He just scoots more to the right and back, and then when it's flipped, he goes to the left and back. I think I'm telling you correctly on that. But that shows he's got a tick. So something's bothering him in there. Something's got him stressed a little bit. But on the other hand, having said that, psychopaths shouldn't have that stress. So he's even though he is a psychopath, he's got some things that don't fit in that box. And not that it bothers me, but it's just interesting to see, because somebody could take that and say, oh, he's not because of this, this, and this. Nope, he's one, I promise you. So listen to how choppy his sentences are. He doesn't know the answer to that question. He's making something up as he goes along, because he's trying to remember as he's speaking, and Greg calls this editing. I believe this is the way he approaches to it, Greg. Yeah. He knows what he's going to say, but he's editing it as he goes, and he's trying to structure a sentence. That's why he's not loping. We talk about loping. You're like a guy on a horse loping through a field. He's not at all. He's kind of walking a little bit, stopping, walking. Listen to the spaces in between there, because he's making this up as he goes along. He's trying to remember what he knows about that, but he doesn't know much about it at all. Greg, what do you got?
Remember, Bundy said he was disappointed and nervous and all of that when something didn't go correctly. I forget his exact words. Like when he missed one of those people, you remember something went wrong, and he said he felt all this apprehension. So they can feel apprehension clearly, because Bundy's one of his people. So if they can feel apprehension, they'll show signs of stress. Doesn't mean that they're feeling fear. There's whatever it is that's causing them to feel, they're going to show that body language. So I think you're seeing that when you're saying, what happened. So somewhere in there, they can feel disappointment, they can feel whatever. And he came with a plan on what he was going to say, because he came in dressed a certain way and set up a certain way. I think it's a navigated answer, just a navigated answer, so you don't perceive him as a monster, because he's walking this thin line of, hey, I've got this dark being inside that has some kind of control. And if you ask this guy, I bet the reason he's got this stuff, he'd say, well, this is a symbol of sealing a demon. There's going to be some kind of something, or he wouldn't have worn it, is my guess. But when he comes out there and he does this thing, is simply that. When he asks this question, or when he says this sentence, I could finish it for him. One of the reasons it was so hard to explain why I felt is because you didn't. You just didn't. You didn't feel anything. You just did what you did. And then he says, I can't comprehend how I thought killing would solve my problems. Here again, we've got that persuasion forehead up, and his chin jut goes out and his mouth narrows. So I think he's a little frustrated he's got to even say and answer this question. If you just listen to this, forget the background music, Mark, the Exorcist music playing in the background. If you forget that and just listen to his story, you can see he's trying to weave the right answer, but he just doesn't have the tools. And this is showing us, I mean, you could feel sorry for people who don't have the tools to feel what you feel. That doesn't mean you want them running around out in the open with access to firearms and knives. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree, Chase. He's selling that story of disassociation to get himself off the hook. It's a good parole idea. Essentially, and I think so. He's got one audience here that he's testing this on, which is the audience that would give him parole. I think there's another audience for this, which is the audience that might look close enough at these sigils here. And I think that's his dark mirror looking through a glass darkly crowd, because he's into a niche of specific literature that my guess is he also has correspondence with those fans. And so there's the parole people who won't really know what's going on here. And then there's those fans who will know what's going on here, and he's playing potentially both audiences at the same time. There's also potentially a TV producer there that has seen these and gone, can we just have those a little bit more prominent? Because I think we've got a nice, idea of the poster of The Exorcist that we'll plant into here when you're talking about your memories, and that'll make it a much more interesting, entertaining show, which it does. I mean, it certainly does.
One of those tape replays.
But you had done this specifically in the end,
Yes,
to cause your mother maximum pain. This has achieved your goal, which was to effectively mean your mother lost both her children at once, one to death, one to incarceration. When you saw her completely grief-stricken and in utter torment, that is what you were hoping to achieve by your actions. So I'm just curious whether the reality of what you hope to achieve lived up to your expectation or hope.
no. At no point did I ever feel like I had accomplished something or that I had achieved a goal. And one of the reasons why it's so hard for me to talk about how I felt at that time is because I'm completely estranged from who I was then. And now I can't comprehend how I could ever have thought that killing my sister would solve my problems. It's like we're here talking about a completely different person. It's like you're asking me to try to climb inside someone else's head and peer through his eyes and catalog his thought.
You're in here for a monstrous crime. That, I presume you would agree, it was a monstrous crime. You've always challenged the notion that you yourself are a monster. Professionals have said you're a psychopath. How do you categorize yourself?
To respond to the question about whether or not I may be a psychopath or a sociopath or whichever phrase you want to use, I want to point out in the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, psychiatrists and psychologists and other mental health professionals now favor the idea of spectrum. And I'll be the first to agree with you. And yes, I did commit a monstrous crime, but does one mistake define my entire life? And does that one mistake mean that I'm at the extreme end of the spectrum? I don't think it does.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So he says here that, people shouldn't be judged, I guess, by their mistakes. I think that's dependent on the mistake. I think there's levels of mistake. But what he's trying to put forward is this logic of and I guess cultural theory that everyone has the right to be reassessed, and the therapeutic valuation that everybody can be changed with the right help, the right therapy. Everybody can be changed, and everybody has rights for that change to happen. And so ultimately, the big ideal here is everyone is redeemable. Everyone is redeemable. And that is something that you see in religions, and we see that in psychotherapy, or some people's idea of religion and some people's idea of psychotherapy, that everybody is redeemable. And people will throw that out idea, everybody deserves a second chance, is the idea of everybody's redeemable. Well, I think that's one way to look at it. Then there's another way to look at it, which is actually there are some cases where that is absolutely not true. Now, there are certain parties who won't go down that avenue with you, and they'll go, no. Like everybody gets this moment where they get rejudged, and like it's game off. Okay, there's a moment where you get that chance again. Both in religion and in psychology, we get those moments. Well, he knows that, and he's going to play that one, and that's what he's playing right now. So when you hear him say that, think about, I personally go, no, it just really depends on the mistake. It really does. I mean, we'd have to judge it on a case-by-case basis. That's a very expensive thing to do, by the way, is judging everything on a case-by-case basis. It's much cheaper to go, well, everybody or nobody. Like, you always get a second chance, or nobody gets a second chance. You can make quick decisions on that. So he knows that that's the way the majority of people might tend to think, is they want a simple solution to, he said it right at the start. He said, look, you want simple solutions to this. Here's this simple solution. Everybody is redeemable. And think, when I say that, which side do you go? Do you go, I mean, that's how it should be? Or do you go, no, not at all? Or do you go, yeah, it's some delineation in between? Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, so I just put a note. He's using the good book to defend himself, the DSM. I love the fact, and Chase, you're going to talk about the DSM in a minute. I know I almost wanted to go right behind you because I was going to even add a little more nuance. So I'll let you add the nuance when we're done. But that might be true, that it's on a continuum. It's somewhere on a spectrum. Okay, let's assume that is. Let's for a second assume it is. We all know that Hare's psychopathy checklist says you got to get a certain score to get there. Okay, good. The other thing he says right up front is, he does with that persuasion face again, yes, I did commit a monstrous crime. So out the window is, I'm not a villain, because we looked up the dictionary definition, he is a villain. Out the window is, I'm not a monster, because who commits monstrous crimes? Monsters. So now he's a monster and a villain. The other thing he does that I find really interesting, he chooses a diagnostic tool, which if you're going to use, then you have to use the tool, and that's what dictates that you are. But he doesn't. He says, I don't think it does. So he's using the tool, but he's going off script to decide whether it fits him or not. Chase, what do you got?
Before we talk about the DSM, as Greg predicted, let me take you on a quick guided tour of his manipulation strategy here. There's immediate agreement with Pierce. He hedges and distances himself from any direct answer. He borrows authority from the DSM. He softens the crime twice using the word mistake, uses an FBI negotiation technique to get you to make an agreement that is illogical, but places him slightly away from the worst outcome. This is designed to be a psychological foot in the door technique. It's a method for getting gradual unconscious agreement. And then there's half blinking. He's sizing up a target. He's checking to make sure that it's working on the target. So let's chat about this little guy. This is the DSM for everybody that always comments about the tabs. Let me give you a quick close-up, what they all look like there. So in this book, there's no diagnosis of psychopathy. It doesn't exist in here. And the people who write it are pretty smart. But in my opinion, they tend to medicalize normal everyday life in a lot of these conditions. They turn them into medical things. And I think some other criticism of the DSM, it forces a lot of clinicians to make guesses about things like the word callousness. How do I define callousness? Well, that's up to you. You do it however you want. As a second note, if you want a little more criticism and a fact, 69% of the doctors and people, experts who built this book have direct ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Proven. And with all that said, it's a great guide. And as Mark says all the time, all models are wrong and some are useful. And this is just useful, but human beings don't fit into Excel spreadsheets all the time. So people are different. Scott, what do you got?
All right. He was ready for this answer. Yeah, he's read the DSM. And he's decided the best bet for him to sound normal is talking about all this stuff because he's preparing for that parole board. He's preparing to try to get himself out with a great story. We're hearing more severity softened as he talks about his mistake. And this thing just sounds rehearsed. And if you listen to it one more time, this is one of his go-tos. I'm sure he's got a little book where he's written all these things out and goes over them. I'm not positive, but that's what I think he'd be doing because he seems like that kind of guy, to make sure he's got everything straight with his story. So, okay.
One of those tape replays.
You're in here for a monstrous crime. That, I presume you would agree, it was a monstrous crime. You've always challenged the notion that you yourself are a monster. Professionals have said you're a psychopath. How do you categorize yourself?
To respond to the question about whether or not I may be a psychopath or a sociopath or whichever phrase you want to use, I want to point out in the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, psychiatrists and psychologists and other mental health professionals now favor the idea of spectrum. And I'll be the first to agree with you. And yes, I did commit a monstrous crime, but does one mistake define my entire life? And does that one mistake mean that I'm at the extreme end of the spectrum? I don't think it does.
Your relationship with your mother is very complicated. And she's been advised by professionals that she should have nothing more to do with you. She should relocate somewhere where you have no idea where she is, change her name, necessary, and sever all links with you. That professionally is their advice to her. She's refused to act on that advice and describes what she has for you as unconditional love. What do you make of your mother's decision to stand by you?
It astounds me, the fact that she can still love me and the fact that she still cares for me and stands by me. It astounds me every day.
You have an IQ of 141, which is pretty well genius level. That would make you an exceptional intellect for people who are normally in prison. One of the things most people say when they serve a lot of time is just how boring and repetitive, mundane the life is. How do you deal with that?
Books. I am a voracious reader. I'm always reading. And
what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I'm reading several things at the moment right now. I am reading a collection of horror stories edited by Mark Morris, and I am reading the newest issue of Black Static, a zine published in the UK.
People might be surprised that you read horror stories, given you lived through a horror story.
I enjoy reading horror and dark fiction because it can be hard for me to read novels about mundane life and mundane concerns. When I read a horror story, it's almost soothing in a way because I find myself, it's almost like I'm touching the mind of the writer, someone who understands, who has either been in a dark place, him or herself, or has seen that place and is able to express it or articulate it in a way that I feel I can't.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
I just keep wishing we could flip these videos around. We watched these in Dropbox, We use Dropbox as an app independently, so we don't watch together. We never compare notes. But there's a button in Dropbox that says flip horizontal, and I almost clicked it today, but I thought it would mess us all up. So when Pierce mentions his IQ, there's a smile, withholding movement in the mouth, a little withheld smile. I think some people will see this as ego and pride and narcissism. Who doesn't? Show me somebody who doesn't want to be called smart or brilliant. I think that's normal. We're not seeing that doesn't mean anybody's a psychopath. And they're like, oh, yes, look at that ego. That's everyone. That's all humans, I think. So think about somebody calling you brilliant or smart. It feels good. So I think what's actually interesting here is that we're seeing his emotional intelligence to show humility, to conceal the smile. That's what was interesting to me. So I don't think it's showing a lot of excessive ego. I think it's showing us that he's trying to look unaffected by the comment on his IQ, which is even more interesting to me. And then it's right back to Stoic. It's kind of weird and behavior when he's describing this stuff. There's something called black static. I had to look it up today. I'm sure y'all probably did too. It's this weird and kind of grotesque horror magazine. So that's all in the horror genre. His description is pretty honest, but he stops short of telling us that it's the only way that he can feel a rush. It's the only pathway to feeling something. And we're also hearing how he sees us. How does he see us? Listen carefully, and you'll hear a horrible and disturbing revelation about how important people are to him in everyday life. We are mundane. And we are boring. So in reality, this might be the only thing he has because he can't watch videos of people actually being killed and tortured, which would probably be even more stimulating for him. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I think this is a great question. I think he delivered it really well because when he says he's astounded, because he says that because he thinks that's the best thing to say. And that because he knows we would think that he understands love and she understands why she loves him, but he doesn't understand it at all. And you brought up his IQ. Let's talk about that for a minute. 141 is high. That is high. But most people with an IQ above that, like really high, let's say between 160 and 170, quite often they'll feign ignorance to a lot of stuff. You'd never know you met that person that was that smart. Because they don't want anybody to know, because they don't want them to think they're, well, I can't cuss, but somebody they wouldn't like, but they want to hide so people won't think they're arrogant, won't think they're. But with psychopaths, they want to tell you how smart they are. They can't help it. They want you to know. Now, what he's figured out is he can be quiet, and he's going to throw these other things in later on about how much he reads and all this other stuff. But no. He's smart, but he's no genius. We're not dealing with a genius here. He's not that high up. When you get into like he could get into Mensa, which is, that's no big deal. That's like a club of it's a lot of, they give you these logic questions. There's a lot of different kinds of questions you have to answer to get in Mensa, right? But it's like the smart people club. And with my experience, they've always been kind of snotty and all that. I didn't like them at all. Now, people that are in Mensa don't say, "Oh, that guy's, he's not a good guy." But I'm just saying, in my experience, for the people that I've met from that, I didn't like him at all. So, and a lot of people that are smarter than him, they're not good with executive skills. Some organizational problems they have. They're not good with meetings or calendars and things like that. Even though their IQ would be high, but they don't want you to know that. Whereas he's subtly letting you know that he's playing the long game, and look how smart I am. That's what this guy's doing. I know what this looks like. That's what he's doing. I'm going to show you how he's doing it here in a couple minutes as well. So I'm sure people have, people this smart, but that are smarter than him, but you just don't know it. But when you hit around that 140 thing, that's usually where astronauts and that kind of thing are. And those guys are brilliant. And women are brilliant. They really are. But you have to be really analytical. And once you start hitting that IQ that high, you can look at things analytically and do really well in it. Still absent of some of the executive skills that come with that. But still, you can be analytical when it comes to that. But the psychopath with the high IQ, they always want you to know. They'll always make sure you know. They'll make sure everybody knows. And he's going to play that card subtly. That's what he's doing because he is smart. 141 is smart. So he's going to play the intelligence card subtly on this. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So 141. It's moderately gifted. Moderately gifted. And so Piers is clearly playing him to give him some status, because if Piers wanted to go in the other direction, he would go. So that's moderately gifted, and there are so many people higher than that. Okay. So what's the name of that magazine that he's reading, Chase, again? What's it called? Like
Black Static.
Black Static. Yes, I think that's the crowd that he's wearing these for. Is the Black Static crew. I think whatever world revolves around that, and he maybe has some kind of interaction with. I think these are probably for that. It's what I love, and for me, really puts him in the moderately gifted area. Is he says novels that are not horror are mundane. So he clearly hasn't ever read the Magic Realists. So I would suggest to him the Magic Realists, which has a beautiful crossover between the extraordinary out of the mundane. There's the classic of that style is 100 Years of Solitude, and I think there would be some irony if you would engage with that piece of Magic Realism.
Or the illuminated works of William Blake. You have him read that and then tell it and say that.
Well, he's got the battle in heaven and earth, so he has met a page of that while probably watching some other horror films. Greg,
he needs to get into Charles Bukowski.
Yeah, guys, intelligence comes in lots of flavors. One of them is not stabbing your family member to death and going to prison for the rest of life. That's a kind of intelligence. There's a lot of ways to be intelligent, lots of ways to apply intelligence. Now, if your IQ is 100, if your IQ is 50, if your IQ is 90, there's lots of ways to be smart in that process. If your IQ is 141 and you think that's an end-all, be-all, and that means you're going to be, whatever it is, you got to be careful that you don't get wrapped up in your own crazy. And that's what I think we're facing here. If you want to look for normal here, I'll tell you what, Mark, I think there is irony there. This guy's going to have a little bit of time to read this magazine for a long time coming with this personality. He'll get lots of time for Black Static because watch him. The reason, Scott, you hit it dead on. He's astounded because he cannot understand what he's talking about. She loved you enough to be there. There's not a circuit in that little brain of his for that. And just every time he does one of these things where he comes and tries to respond to a question, he's just adding to his creepy suit. The decorator crab thing I always say. He's going, oh, another creepy little thing I can stick up here is this. That's not how you get out of prison. You get out of prison by looking like a functional, normal. Doesn't matter how smart or stupid you are. It matters that you're a functional, normally behaving piece of society. And to your point, Chase, that's what he sees as mundane. He sees anything that's not this horror is mundane. That's real easy for him to say sitting behind bars and reading these books, but it's what's going to keep him there as well. His chin, the only thing I see that looks normal about him at one point is when Piers is saying your mother loved you so much that she's doing this. See his head kind of tilt to a data intake that's like, hey, I never thought of that. It's a weird thing to see, and it just drives me one more place. The other thing to notice, that forehead's up again. And when he gets to mundane, he's doing that persuasive face. I think all he's doing is regurgitating exactly what Piers said earlier in the question about mundane and boring and saying, boom, I need something that isn't mundane and boring, and you're right. That's a personality trait that he's gotten away with mimicry. We saw him with his mother's face. I think that's all we're seeing. I think this guy, like you always say, Scott, there's nobody in there. There's somebody in there, but he's a mean little bastard. It's what there is.
One of those tape replays.
Your relationship with your mother is very complicated. She's been advised by professionals that she should have nothing more to do with you. She should relocate somewhere where you have no idea where she is, change her name, necessary, and sever all links with you. That professionally is their advice to her. She's refused to act on that advice and describes what she has for you as unconditional love. What do you make of your mother's decision to stand by you?
It astounds me, the fact that she can still love me and the fact that she still cares for me and stands by me. It astounds me every day.
You have an IQ of 141, which is pretty well genius level. That would make you an exceptional intellect for people who are normally in prison. One of the things most people say when they serve a lot of time is just how boring and repetitive, mundane the life is. How do you deal with that?
Books. I am a voracious reader. I'm always reading. And
what are you reading at the moment?
Well, I'm reading several things at the moment right now. I am reading a collection of horror stories edited by Mark Morris, and I am reading the newest issue of Black Static, a zine published in the UK.
People might be surprised that you read horror stories, given you lived through a horror story.
I enjoy reading horror and dark fiction because it can be hard for me to read novels about mundane life and mundane concerns. When I read a horror story, it's almost soothing in a way because I find myself, it's almost like I'm touching the mind of the writer, someone who understands, who has either been in a dark place, him or herself, or has seen that place and is able to express it or articulate it in a way that I feel I can't.
The question for me, Paris, is this, is you're obviously very intelligent, very articulate. You pause before almost every answer you give me for thought. Your demeanor, the way you're sitting, is very measured. It's very, like, regulated, I guess. For all the charm that you obviously can turn on, that actually lurking inside you is a very dark side, which makes you exceptionally dangerous. And that the only reason you're in such apparent control is because you don't want to do anything that might stop you getting out of here. What do you say to people that believe that about you?
I say to the people who believe I'm just biding my time until I get out that they are fools, and I have nothing but scorn for them. And I realize that, as you say, my demeanor, I understand the way I present myself is disturbing to some people. I understand that I paint myself in dark hues. And I really don't care because I'm being honest. This is who I am. And I've reached a point in my life where I really don't care about what people think about me. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to the interview. But I know myself. I have to...
Do you care what I think about you?
I would like you to appreciate the fact that I'm willing to be honest with you.
This is affect changing. He's getting
It's
angry.
a one flash of anger we've seen.
Yeah, he's getting angry.
I would like you to...
How do I know you're being honest?
Because I've basically just sat here and told you that if there's a spectrum of aberrancy, that I'm far from normal. I've agreed with you when you've described my actions as heinous and monstrous. I'm not protesting my innocence. I'm not downplaying the severity of what I've done.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
You're fools, fools, I tell you, and I scorn you. What kind of grandiose BS language is that? Another, what do we always find on the checklist? Grandiose behavior. There you go. There's a really good one. I love it. Watch the mother as she has some condemning space faced with contempt. As Pierce says, you paused before. She's not condemning Pierce. She's condemning him. She's got contempt for him because she knows he's working these guys. You can't miss it. She probably knows this kid better than anybody. She raised him to 13, and then she's been around him since. And he has her mannerisms, so she's going to be able to pick it up. His blink rate goes through the roof as Piers reads metered, dangerous, and controlled. I think he knows that Piers is after him then. And as he comes out of that and goes at Piers, his retort speeds up, which means I think he's getting somewhere into the driver's seat. He's starting to affect this guy. And then he does that grandiose, they're fools and I have nothing but scorn for them. I love that line. I'm going to use that at work next week, I think. He can't think of what to say, but he uses persuasion face. And I think it's because when he says it's my demeanor, it's the way I present myself. He's trying to figure out what to say because he slows down when he does it. And when he goes to say, I would like you to appreciate my honesty, I think Piers is under his skin. I think Piers could have leaned in right there and really agitated this guy to the point he would respond, maybe even get angry. Because I think he thought he was forming a bond, because you hit it dead on earlier, Scott. They can see weakness. They can't see compassion. They can't see intelligence. They can't see the other parts. And he can't see all of those pieces. That Piers is a cagey guy himself. We've watched him do a lot of these, and he's rough with the questions. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this confrontational question is what kind of lit him up a little bit, because we did see anger. We see that chin come forward. He starts talking about not liking people who say all this stuff about him. He has scorn for him and all. You're right. It's just so cornball. But that's, again, him trying to sound. He's keeping his vernacular on that high level. So you think he's really smart. He's smart, but he's not that smart. So when he says
he's got lots of time to read.
Yeah, when he says aberrancy, aberrant, something is not in normal, is a deviation from what is normal or what we expect to be normal. But he's using that, and people don't talk that way. Who talks like that? This guy, he's locked in prison. He reads all the time, so he's so smart. Yeah, he probably reads a lot, but he's reading junk horror stuff. I don't know. This guy's got my last nerve. So he's mad, and trying to be. He has no control over what's happening in there. Once Piers leaves, he's back to get up at 7, go eat, come back, go to the bathroom, take a shower. He's back to all that stuff. So yeah, and I think when he gets mad, I think we're looking at a powder keg there. So when he gets mad, boy, I bet he pops off. And I don't think he got mad at his sister all of a sudden and did that like he's trying to present that he did. I think that's that long-term, I hate this kid, that kind of stuff. And that's why he did it. So anyway, we talked about what we wouldn't talk about, so I'm not going to talk about that. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I think Piers is great here because he baits him into supervillain, arrogant monologuing on a grand scale. It's beautiful. And really his whole gamble here is you can believe me because I show that I agree with you, though my perception of you is that you're an idiot. I mean, he's really stuck. He's really stuck now. And Piers has really got him there. Now, Piers has had, he used to run a national newspaper in the UK. He's had everybody go through his offices, and he's had drinks with everybody. He's seen every narcissist that can be supplied, and he's stood in front of them with a glass of champagne many, many times, engaging them in conversation. So this is water off a duck's back for Piers. Lovely to see him doing a great job here. Greg, I don't think we've heard from you. What do you got? No, sorry, Chase. I don't think we've heard from you. What have you got?
So we hear him say, I'm not downplaying the severity of what I've done. Yep, I think you are. And if you're watching and you disagree with me, maybe you are a fool.
And I have nothing but scorn for you.
Scorn for it. Scorn.
So the video's interesting. This guy's interesting. He's obviously deep into this campaign of impression management, but he's more honest about his current life and his thoughts than most of the psychopaths we've seen. Think about this. So with him eligible for parole pretty soon, I would imagine that he would hide the satanic symbols and stuff. He would talk about the Bible, how he's grown out of the dark place in his life, and he would never mention all the horror books and stuff. And I'm sure that these two experts that are watching this in the background, they had to have picked up on this, and I'm sure it was edited out. I'm sure that they picked up on this. His change in affect is something that they did talk about, but that's a regular, totally normal and regular response of a psychopath to criticism. So I'm not sure that's something there, but I don't think it's monumental that needs I need to grab my pen really quick kind of a deal. So here's my true question for this. Number one question here if he's willing to self-manage and manipulate perception, but he thinks these things are okay to display, what is the part that's still being hidden? I think if you process this of what he thinks is okay to show to people, you'll realize something really bad might be in there that we're missing. And that's what this video shows us.
One of those tape replays.
The question for me, Paris, is this, is you're obviously very intelligent, very articulate. You pause before almost every answer you give me for thought. Your demeanor, the way you're sitting, is very measured. It's very, like, regulated, I guess. For all the charm that you obviously can turn on, that actually lurking inside you is a very dark side, which makes you exceptionally dangerous. And that the only reason you're in such apparent control is because you don't want to do anything that might stop you getting out of here. What do you say to people that believe that about you?
I say to the people who believe I'm just biding my time until I get out that they are fools, and I have nothing but scorn for them. Because, and I realize that, as you say, my demeanor, I understand the way I present myself is disturbing to some people. I understand that I paint myself in dark hues. And I really don't care because I'm being honest. This is who I am. And I've reached a point in my life where I really don't care about what people think about me. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to the interview. But I know myself. I have to...
Do you care what I think about you?
I would like you to appreciate the fact that I'm willing to be honest with you.
This is affect changing. He's getting
angry. It's one flash of anger we've seen.
Yeah, he's getting angry.
I would like you to...
How do I know you're being honest?
Because I've basically just sat here and told you that if there's a spectrum of aberrancy, that I'm far from normal. I've agreed with you when you've described my actions as heinous and monstrous. I'm not protesting my innocence. I'm not downplaying the severity of what I've done.
There's another way of looking at it, of course, which is that you have exactly the same strong feelings towards Phoenix as the ones you articulated you had towards Ella. And there will be people, there are people who say to your mother, what are you thinking? Having Paris having any kind of relationship with Phoenix, given what he did. And if Paris was released, would you not live in abject terror that that dark side that you've said is still there, but that which you can control might not again explode with anger about your mother, whatever?
Why is it that people assume that I'm just sitting here in prison biding my time and looking at my watch and counting down the days until I can get out and pick up a knife and continue my killing spree? That is ridiculous.
Well, here's my answer to that question. We don't know, do we? Because you've done it once. You did it to your sister who you loved, who you say you still love. And it can be argued that anyone who is capable of doing that to a tiny girl who's their own flesh and blood, their own sister, clearly has a streak in them, a psychopathic streak, which means it cannot be completely ruled out that you don't have that potential to do it again. That's the answer, isn't it? Which would, I'd imagine, you being a smart guy, you know that's the answer, really.
Every single person walking around has it in him or her to commit murder in the right circumstances. Margaret Atwood once wrote that if we were all on trial for our thoughts, we would all be hanged. And I want to remind people that there is more to me than a mistake that I made 13 years ago.
All right, I'll go first on this one. This is what I'm talking about when I say he's feigning being intelligent, because he's trying to give the impression that he's a voracious reader. Man, when he said that, Margaret Atwood didn't write that. She didn't say if we were all put on trial for our thoughts, we would all be hanged. She didn't say that. A lot of people think she did, but she didn't say it. And he thinks it comes from The Handmaid's Tale. It doesn't. People have said things that are similar to that about that book, but he didn't read it in there. He didn't read that somewhere. He's read a summation of a book or something, and that's where he got it. Now, she did write a little... a group of horror stories that were The name was Murder in the Dark. That's what it was. And so I'm sure he got into her by reading that. And when he was researching her, he saw that and said, oh, she said this and it sounded that cool. She didn't say that. All right, I have to break in here just a second because you're witnessing what I'm sure will become known as the Atwood incident. See how hard I'm selling this thing and just oh yeah, just talking about how much I know what I'm talking about. I'm completely wrong. I am completely wrong. And I'm in there selling it hard, man. So just so you know, these guys are never going to let me hear the end of this. And I couldn't take it out because I always leave their stuff in when they mess up. So what comes around goes around. And let's get back into the Atwood incident. So this is where he's trying to act like he's all smart. And when he starts this stuff, those eyes get a little bit wide and he gets real quiet and he starts speaking from his damn 2-inch depth that makes me want to puke because he's trying to seem all smart and intelligent. He's 141, but he wants you to know that. So that's why he's being so subtle about, Margaret Atwood once wrote, no, she didn't, stupid. No, she didn't. Oh, I'm going to hush. Chase, what do you got?
The one phrase in here that really hit me in the face here was continue my killing spree. I think it's pretty strange how he mentions this as a spree without anyone suggesting it. He's also using my. This is ownership, not a killing spree, not some killing spree, not the killing spree, not any other word, my killing spree. Continue my killing spree. I think there's ownership there. And Pierce tries to get him to admit that it's possible after kind of appealing to his intelligence, which is exactly what a good interview should be doing here. He dodges this completely and generalizes everything into this mist of chaff and redirect, like Greg says all the time. He socializes the issue by saying we can all commit murder so that our capacity for it means we're just like him. The trouble here is that he's confusing capacity for murder with probability for murder. He then takes it another 30,000 feet higher by just saying that thinking about murder is the same as what he's done. If you go back here, you'll hear all of these little tropes coming out. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah. So I took Peach out for a walk this morning, and because my hope was is that sometimes Mrs. Atwood is out and about, and I'd be able to go, hey, Mrs. Atwood, why do you think somebody like this would quote from your book, Alias Grace? And she wasn't out and about, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to have got that. She's a big fan of Peach. Not a fan of me at all, but loves the dog. I mean, not that she's
the
not
guy who wants Peach.
I mean, she's not out, looking to talk to male neighbors, but she is interested in the dogs. So Alias Grace is from my understanding a novel that she wrote based on an actual. I can't see it from
That's
there.
That's it. There it is.
Yeah. There was an actual real event of a woman killing 2 people and going to trial, and she's written this novel outside of those real events. And what it deals with is the idea of multiple personalities, the idea of who owns the truth of that. Should one personality, one alias, be punished for the crimes of another? And so to that end, I would say he has at least read, the notes on this, because it does fit quite beautifully with his argument around this. In fact, if you look up some of the quotes from that, book, and you're like, wow, that's his argument. That's his argument. That's his argument. That's his argument. So some of the classic quotes from Alias Grace are his argument for that. Now, that doesn't mean that he's super smart. It just means he's a good collector of literary evidence. He could just as easily, like some of the other psychopaths out there, use song lyrics as some as some do. He's a collector of popular icons that will make his case, but he's not inventing his own case. He's not going, look, here's how it feels to me. Here's what I construct out of it. He's not authoring anything of his own. To that end, you could go, he's not being authentic with us at all. He's just borrowing from other authors to fit the pattern that he wants to push forward on us. If I see Mrs. Atwood tomorrow with the dog, I'll ask her and report back what she thinks. Yeah, do.
And ask her about that if people attribute it to The Handmaid's Tale, because that's the impression I got from them. You know.
Right.
So, and
I don't know who. I mean, the quote is in the book. I mean, I don't know what it's attributed to that book.
He's got all the time in the world. You can read everything she's ever written.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys giving me the.
Yeah. So let's take it a step further. We're not talking ideology here. Ideology is beautiful. I'm worried about where this guy's going to get out and murder somebody. That's very pragmatic. I come from a very pragmatic world. So let's take his argument apart. Number one, yes, if people were judged for their thoughts, yeah, we would all be in trouble. But that's not what we're judging you based on. You stabbed your little sister 17 times. What is the likelihood you'll do it again? Oh, and if we're now going to say that we're judging you for your thoughts, now you just told me that you have murderous thoughts. Okay, and you have a pattern. Past behaviors are indicative of future behaviors. That right there is the end of the road for you. I'm done. That'd be the conversation. And here's where a guy who thinks he's smarter than he is gets himself in a bind by coming up with something brilliant. Mark, I agree. He's brilliant for following that. But what he's trying to do is wrap himself in all these cloaks of some kind of grandeur that he thinks is going to protect him. Back to, what was it, fools and scorn, this kind of thinking. Well, I have nothing but scorn for you, you fool, because you just admitted that you have those thoughts. I'm done with you. Next.
One of those tape replays.
There's another way of looking at it, of course, which is that you have exactly the same strong feelings towards Phoenix as the ones you articulated you had towards Ella. And there are people who say to your mother, what are you thinking? Having Paris having any kind of relationship with Phoenix, given what he did. And if Paris was released, would you not live in abject terror that dark side that you've said is still there, but that which you can control might not again explode with anger about your mother, whatever?
Why is it that people assume that I'm just sitting here in prison biding my time and looking at my watch and counting down the days until I can get out and pick up a knife and continue my killing spree? That is ridiculous.
Well, here's my answer to that question. We don't know, do we? Because you've done it once. You did it to your sister who you loved, who you say you still love. And it can be argued that anyone who is capable of doing that to a tiny girl who's their own flesh and blood, their own sister, clearly has a streak in them, a psychopathic streak, which means it cannot be completely ruled out that you don't have that potential to do it again. That's the answer, isn't it? Which would I'd imagine, you being a smart guy, you know that's the answer, really.
Every single person walking around has it in him or her to commit murder in the right circumstances. Margaret Atwood once wrote that if we were all on trial for our thoughts, we would all be hanged. And I want to remind people that there is more to me than a mistake that I made 13 years ago.
If you were your mother, would you keep up contact with you?
I would have kept contact.
Why?
Because I don't believe that anyone is above redemption. If I ever get out of prison and have a child and someone murders my child, I will talk to the person who murdered that child. I will at least give him a chance.
But you see, okay, here's where I pick you up again. You've painted a scenario where you may have a child in the future. Say you had a little girl and somebody stabbed that little girl to death, 17 blows of a large knife. I find it very hard to believe that your reaction in that circumstance would not be murderous towards that person.
If that's what you believe, then you clearly need to spend more than an hour with me, because you haven't You don't know me that well.
I would think that's a natural reaction of most fathers.
You're right, and I agree with that.
Why would it not be yours?
Because after living the life that I've lived and aching every day for a chance to be seen as more than just the murderer, I would give that person that chance.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
We see a grief muscle engaged, these 5 muscles that create a cluster and a little upside down horseshoe right there for the first time. For the first time, when he says, "You don't understand me." Little girl's been murdered, all kinds of horrific things, but that's the only time we see it. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, obviously fake, ridiculous. Mark?
I don't think anyone is above redemption. No, it should be below redemption. I don't think anybody is below redemption, not above redemption. So he's already, turned upside down the whole idea. He is give a murderer a chance. Well, chance of what? Chance to do it again. Well, give them forgiveness, give them the opportunity to put things right, but a chance. So that's wrong. Yeah, he thinks the world owes him redemption. Extraordinary. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing about being above, but he should have said the answer should be because I love my son. That's the answer, not because no one is below redemption or above, or whatever he's saying, above redemption. Oh. No, the answer is because I love my son, period. But he doesn't know that, or he can't, because he doesn't have those feelings. He doesn't understand that. And I could go on too. I'll stop there.
One of those tape replays.
If you were your mother, would you keep up contact with you?
I would have kept contact.
Why?
Because I don't believe that anyone is above redemption. If I ever get out of prison and have a child and someone murders my child, I will talk to the person who murdered that child. I will at least give him a chance.
But you see, okay, here's where I pick you up again. You've painted a scenario where you may have a child in the future. Say you had a little girl and somebody stabbed that little girl to death, 17 blows of a large knife. I find it very hard to believe that your reaction in that circumstance would not be murderous towards that person.
If that's what you believe, then you clearly need to spend more than an hour with me because you don't know me that well.
I would think that's a natural reaction of most fathers.
You're right, and I agree with that.
Why would it not be yours?
Because after living the life that I've lived and aching every day for a chance to be seen as more than just the murderer, I would give that person that chance.
I just want to show you before we finish just a picture of your sister, Ella. That's her just before she died. Beautiful young girl with her whole life at over. What do you feel when you look at that picture?
I feel like I don't deserve to be shown that picture.
What do you mean?
I am the reason why that every picture of my sister is only of her as a girl. I am the reason why there are no pictures of her at age 5 or 6 or 7 or beyond. I'm the reason why that you will never have new pictures of her, and I don't deserve to look at that picture.
Paris, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I was serious when I told you that I refused to ever do something like this again. I was serious when I told you that that mistake doesn't define me.
I get that. I mean, it's the scariest thing for you, actually not being able to be 100% certain that you can control yourself.
I think the most distressing emotion I've ever felt in my life is powerlessness. And interviews like this are a way for me to gain a sense of power over myself through self-knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Paris.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
I just got one point here. He's just routinely using the word refuse. We refuse things that are asked of us. We refuse things that are repetitively intrusive. Refusing and being certain about something not happening are two very different things. He's already using the language of uncertainty here. So that's all I got. Mark?
Yeah, just count the eyes. I. What do you feel when you see this picture? I. All he sees is a chance to talk about him. Greg?
Yeah, I think it's more than that, Mark. I think it's like you asking me about cooking. I would go, we're going to saute and fricassee and puree some ingredients and braise some other contents till we get the perfect concoction. You know why? Because I can find those words. I don't know how to cook. This guy doesn't have any idea what any of those words mean. And so he has to string together words that are alien to him. He's speaking a foreign language. He has no idea what anything feels like or why he should feel remorse for this. His brain doesn't function that way. Scott, what do you got?
I agree. It's confusing for him because he's supposed to talk about what he feels, but he doesn't because he can't. His brain doesn't work that way. His amygdala is either missing, it's malformed, or it just doesn't work, period. Something's wrong with it. So he has no empathy. He doesn't understand love. He doesn't understand anything from an empathetic perspective. He doesn't feel anything. So that's totally normal behavior for a clinical psychopath.
One of those tape replays.
I just want to show you before we finish just a picture of your sister, Ella. That's her just before she died. Beautiful young girl with her whole life at her. What do you feel when you look at that picture?
I feel like I don't deserve to be shown that picture.
What do you mean?
I am the reason why that every picture of my sister is only of her as a girl. I'm the reason why there are no pictures of her at age 5 or 6 or 7 or beyond. I'm the reason why that you will never have new pictures of her, and I don't deserve to look at that picture.
Paris, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I was serious when I told you that I refused to ever do something like this again. I was serious when I told you that that mistake doesn't define me.
I get that. I mean, it's the scariest thing for you, actually not being able to be 100% certain that you can control yourself.
I think the most distressing emotion I've ever felt in my life is powerlessness. And interviews like this are a way for me to gain a sense of power over myself through self-knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Paris.
You guys should do a video on me selling that.
You hadn't read it, though. You said
I haven't read that book of hers, no. But I thought he was going to the classics, you know, because that's what I think he would do. I think he'd go to the classics, you know, and say, "Oh, I've read," and just read part of it so he can get some highlights from it, and then grab a quote out of it and say, "Well, you know, she said." You know,
well, I mean, fair play to him. Fair play to him. He's reading Atwood before *Handmaid's Tale* has come out on film. So, like, you know, he's like, I mean, he's got
came out
time.
in '85, though. See, so he did have time. He's had time to read that.
Yeah, but when did *Handmaid's Tale* come out on film? When was it? Because most people on the planet had no idea who Margaret Atwood was.
Just one more thing.
All right, Mark, how things look for you so far?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at those medallions that he's wearing and you take out, you know, the popularist idea, which is not untrue, that they have a satanic element to them, and I'm sure that's why he's wearing them. You could interpret them as the sense of power over yourself and your emotions through self-knowledge. And I think that's the gambit he's playing. He's going, I really know myself now. And because I know myself, I would have power over myself. So I would never hurt anybody. I now know that. That's utter nonsense. Piers is bang on. It's like, no, you don't. You're absolutely trying to play your audience. We've seen you coming. IQ of 141. Well, it's not an IQ of stealth. Like you're not so smart that you're coming enough undercover that it's not obvious what you're doing. I think Piers was very kind to him. I mean, he made a great show because he was kind to him. Kind in terms of allowing him to drip out this arrogance that he's being stealthy with his argument. He's a complete idiot. Chase, what do you got on this?
There's not a lot of selling and false perfection, as I expected. Watching this morning, sitting down at the desk, not a lot of this. I expected it. And there's also, he's not selling us on the idea of him being fully free of psychopathy and like so much better. And he's also not like playing up the I'm a murderer card like we see some psychopaths do. But there's still lots and lots of leakage, and psychopaths are not immune to leaking out truth accidentally, which we've seen in this video for sure. I think there's a good chance, in my opinion, he will be dangerous if he's released, but I'm still shocked that he was open about parts of that, and I'm wondering if he's comfortable with those parts being open. The part that's hidden must be pretty bad. Greg?
I'm with you, Chase. Whatever's hiding deep inside there has got to be just horrific. I don't know what's going on. But what I can tell you is he doesn't know what normal is. The whole concept of penitentiary is about penitence. It's about making someone better. And the way you get out of there is that they believe that you have become a better person or that you have whatever it is. Well, you don't typically flaunt society's standards by coming out and wearing all that stuff he's wearing. So that tells me he probably is not aware, or there's some other reason, to your point, Mark, he's trying to, do some kind of Maslow thing there. But either way, it doesn't come across that way. And it's also a great example of you can be a psychopath and intelligent, which he is both, and not be a mastermind. Everybody's afraid of them like there's some kind of, mastermind. And you say this all the time, Scott. They're an intraspecies predator, and they're just like any other predator. They're going after whatever that is. Now, we don't know enough about him to know whether he would have murdered other people. Thank God we don't know. They caught him at that time. It's an unfortunate thing. This little girl had to lose her life. But if I were choosing and I were on a parole board, I'd be like, nope, don't think so. Next. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this was great because we saw classic cues that tell us this guy's a psychopath. You got to see somebody who's a psychopath being asked about feelings, about love over and over several times. I think Piers did a great job with this because he was being aggressive. And I guess it's because he's not afraid of the guy coming across the table at him because there's no table. It's just a big thing of plexiglass and bars, so he can say anything he wants to. But I think he did a great job at that. And I think it's if you want to see a psychopath, again, go back and watch this stuff again. Skip over that part where I thought I knew everything about what he knew, but the rest of it's really good. So, all right, fellas, think this is another good one, and we'll see you next time.
The behavior panel.
And I appreciate you guys saying, "Oh, you want to go back and redo that again?" But if I did, I wouldn't be able to look you in the face after this if I leaned into that so hard. So
you leaned in good.
Thanks. Oh man, I was going with it. I hate this guy.
So what do you got?